All right, thank you guys so much for checking in this first video of music theory. We're going to have a total of 4 classes. You can split them up week by week. But the basic layout for the next 4 classes, this class we're going to be looking at philosophy. So why should we learn about music theory? So maybe you're a worship leader, you're a worship team, or maybe you're just a musician that wants to learn about music in a worship context. We're going to look at why is it important for us, how beneficial is it for us to learn music theory. And we're also today going to look at the Nashville number system and how that is a foundation to everything else that we're going to learn moving forward with music theory. The next 2 weeks, we're going to be learning how to play by ear, and we're getting more into that as this lesson goes on. Maybe we'll touch on a little bit, but then especially the next 2 weeks. And then the very last week, we're going to look at tying together the loose ends. So we're going to look at chord construction, and we're going to look at some rhythm music theory as well. So I want to encourage you, download the PDF that follows along with each class. So this class, we have a PDF. You can fill in the blanks. So where you're at, pause this video, go ahead and download that and print that out. Don't yet print out the cheat sheet that's with this because we're going to use that to check our work at the end. So don't print that out quite yet. So go ahead, pause the video, go ahead and print that out, and we'll get started. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at why we should learn music theory. And I have 3 points for you that I kind of want to break up and give you why we should learn. So the first one is to pursue biblical faithfulness. Here at Grace Church, Pastor Larry Kaufman talks a lot about biblical faithfulness. And the definition for biblical faithfulness is to take what you have been given by God and to multiply it, to make it grow. So we want to take what God has given us, the gifts that He's given us, the talent that He's given us, and we want to take it and we want to multiply it. We want to invest in it. We see Jesus talking about this in the Gospels. In Luke chapter 16, verse 10, He says, "One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much." In Matthew 25, we see the story of the talents. And so the master gives 3 talents, the master gives 3 servants talents. And for the 2, they invested it, and the last one, he didn't invest it. And so for the 2 that did invest in their talents that they were given, this is what it says, Matthew 25, verse 23. His master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." So this idea of biblical faithfulness means to take what God has given us, invest in it, and make it multiply. And we want to do that with our gifts, with our passion for music in a worship context. Number 2 of why we should learn music theory is to pursue excellence. A definition for excellence is a talent or quality which is usually good and so surpasses ordinary standards. So I like Jonathan Helzer. He talks about the difference between excellence and perfectionism. So he says excellence is driven out of joy and love, and perfectionism is driven out of fear. So to break that down a little more, we look at what God has done for us, what He's doing for us, what He's going to do for us, what He's given us, how He's blessed us, what He's done through sending His Son Jesus, and out of all that it drives us towards joy and towards love. And out of that joy and love, we want to take what He's given us and work as much as we can to multiply it, to honor and glorify Him with what we've been given. Perfectionism, on the other hand, is driven out of fear. And so if we are looking for man's approval, if we are looking for God to approve of what we're doing, like God's already happy with us. He's so in love with us already. But when we have this wrong perspective, we strive for perfectionism and trying to do good in the sight of man. And it drives us to sounding good out of fear. And really we want to pursue excellence. We see this in Daniel, chapter 6, verse 3. Daniel they're kind of evaluating the kind of person that he is, and it says, "Then this Daniel became distinguished above all other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him." And so we see this idea of biblical faithfulness and excellence all in one. We see that Daniel really pouring into and doing the things he was given well and given more. And we also see that he had an excellent spirit in him. So in a worship context, we want to pursue excellence, and one way that we can do that is through furthering our gifts through learning music theory. The very last point why we should learn music theory is to pursue freedom in worship. To pursue freedom in worship. I remember the first time that I played with a click track in my ears, and it was horrid. It was the worst thing that I felt like I could do while playing the drums. The drums was my first instrument. I felt like it distracted me, it restricted me, and I remember that was one thing I had to focus on, and I couldn't even focus on the worship. But the thing I found that as I practiced, as I got used to it, it was actually freeing because it was one less thing I had to think about. I didn't have to think about whether or not I was staying on tempo because the click track took care of that. As long as I stayed on the click track, I knew that we were on tempo as a band. And I believe the same thing happens with music theory. To start, it's going to feel like you're kind of restricted, like you have to really focus in on memorizing things and learning new things, and sometimes it will feel like you have to focus on that a little more than usual on the music side of things. But in the end, after we learn music theory, after we get really comfortable with the national number system and playing by ear, it's actually freeing. Because here, we can, after learning the national number system, we can be more free to be engaged in worship. And I have three things how it's actually freeing in worship. One, we can easily transpose music. Let's say last minute, hopefully this doesn't happen a lot, but last minute the worship leader needs to change a key. It's just too high or too low to sing in his vocal range. Instead of having to print out 5 new song sheets in a new key, instead, if you have a sheet that's on the number system, you can transpose it easily because you're not depending on the actual chords. Another way that it's freeing is we can play music by ear. Let's say you've got a worship leader or somebody that you really like that is spontaneous with worship. You're able to play along without having to have chord sheets be the thing that's driving you to sound good. And we'll learn how to play by ear, like I said, in class number 2 and 3. And the very last one is we aren't trapped in our song sheets. We're able to be engaged with the congregation. We're able to be engaged in the worship and the musical worship we're playing with our instruments. We're able to do all of that while not being trapped in looking at a song sheet, depending on the next chord to play along with the band. So the 3 reasons to pursue biblical faithfulness, to pursue excellence, to pursue freedom in worship. That's why as a worship team, as a worship leader, as a musician, it's good for us to learn music theory, to take our gifts and talents and invest in them to get better. So I said we were going to dive right into the Nashville number system in this first class. And in order to understand the national number system, we have to dial it back a few steps and learn first some terms. So there are just 4 terms that you can see on your PDF that we're going to walk through. And the first one is a half step and a whole step. So in a little bit, we're going to learn about the musical alphabet. And hopefully this will make sense as time goes on. But to fill in the definition, a half step is just one jump from a letter to the next on the musical alphabet. Just one jump from a letter to another one on the musical alphabet. A whole step is 2 jumps from one letter to the next on the musical alphabet. So we have this whole step and we have this half step terms that we use in music. The next 2 terms are flat and sharp, and they also have to do with half steps. So a flat takes the note that it's with, that's paired with, and takes it half step below it. So we'll see in a minute, we're going to look at B flat. So it takes the B and it takes it a half step below the B. And then a sharp is the exact opposite. It takes the note that it's with and makes it a half step higher. So if it's a C sharp, it's going to take the C and it's going to make it a half step higher. Sometimes in music you hear somebody telling a vocalist, you're just a little sharp. That means you're just singing a little bit above the right pitch that you're supposed to be at that certain part. And the same with the flat. So now we're ready to dissect the musical alphabet. So just like the English language has an alphabet, and just like we had to learn it growing up and memorize it, we have to do the same with music. And so on your sheet you can see that there are two rows. There's a sharp row and a flat row. And so you can go through the musical alphabet in sharps or in terms of flats. And this is something that you just have to memorize. As you did with the English alphabet. So to start with the sharps, going left to right, there are 12 slots. And so we're just going to walk through each one of them. Starting on the way left, it's A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, and G sharp. And then after that, it would restart back to A. So on the flats, it goes as follows. A, B flat, B, C, D flat, D, E flat, E, F, G flat, G, A flat. And then it would start back at A. So let's look at these four terms we learned a little bit and kind of dissect them. So first, the half step. So a half step, like we said, is just one jump from letter to letter. So for example, a half step from C would be C sharp. A half step from D sharp would be E. A whole step would be two jumps. So a whole step from B would be D flat. A whole step from E flat would be F. And it's that way, the same way with sharps and flats. A whole step and a half step. All right, so I want to encourage you to take some time, learn the musical alphabet, memorize it until you've got it like the back of your hand. The next thing is to learn the formula for finding the Nashville number system. So the Nashville number system basically says that there's going to be 7 chords that you can play in any key that you're in. So for example, if we're in the key of C, there are 7 different chords that I can play that will sound pretty good if the rest of the band is playing at the same time. 7 different chords that I can play that will sound good in that key. And so the Nashville number system has basically uses numbers on a chord sheet, or you say it vocally, to describe the certain chord that you're going to be playing at a certain time. So you can see the formula has the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it starts right back at the 1. So first off, we're going to look at the 1. So underneath the 1, you can write root. Root just means it's the 1 in that key. It's the home base for that key. So the 1 of any key is the note itself of that key. So if we're in the key of C, the 1 is going to be the C chord. If we're in the key of G, the 1 is going to be the G chord. It's that way with any key that we're playing in. The 2, you're going to write whole. What this means is from the 1 to figure out the 2, you just have to do a whole step. So if we're in the key of C, a whole step from C is D. And so I'm going to go through, and under the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the 1, you can write these words all in order. So starting on the way left, it's root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And that's the formula for finding the Nashville number system. Every number in that key. One quick note is that the 2, the 3, and the 6 of any key are 95% of the time minor chords. We say 95%. In worship music, you can assume it's a minor unless it has major written by it. You can assume the 2, 3, and the 6 are minor. And then the 1, the 4, and the 5 of any key are 95% of the time major chords. You can assume the 1, 4, and the 5 in worship is most likely always going to be a major chord. And you can notice we didn't mention the 7. That's because the 7 is considered a diminished chord, and we're not going to get too much into what that means. Most of the time in worship, the only time you're going to see a 7 is like a 5/7 chord. It's not going to be a straight up 7 chord. There's only a few songs I can think of off the top of my head that have a 7 major, kind of like How Great Thou Art, the Paul Baloche modern version has a 7 in that turnaround. I think O Come to the Altar might have one at the way end with the variation of the verse or chorus at the end. There's different weird, I would say, maybe not weird, but artistic choices that are made. But most of the time you're not going to see a 7. So for the formula, we have root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So the root, we said, is the note itself of that key. The whole just stands for a whole step. Half stands for a half step, and we learned what those terms mean earlier. So to put that all into play, we're going to break down the C major scale with the Nashville number system. So on the next part of your sheet, you're going to see a cheat sheet, and we're going to fill in both the C key and the G key together. And then the next 3, your assignment is to kind of fill those in and then check your work with the provided cheat sheet document in this lesson. So let's start with key of C. So the 1, the root of the key of C is the C chord. So if your worship leader is telling the whole band, we're going to end the song on the 1 and you're playing in C, you're going to know that you just need to end on the C chord. Now, to figure out the 2, we have to do a whole step from the 1. So the 1 is C. So a whole step, if you look at your musical alphabet, a whole step from C is going to be D. But we know that the 2 is a minor. So that makes it a minor, so D minor. So now we know the 1 in the key of C is C, the 2 is D minor. So anytime the worship leader says you need to play a D minor here, or sorry, a 2 here, you know that's going to be a D minor. The 3 is going to be a whole step then from the 2, as seen in the formula. So we look at the D in the musical alphabet, and a whole step from D is E. And we remember that 3 is a minor, so it would make it E minor. Now to get to the 4, we need to do a half step. So a half step from E on the musical alphabet is F. So we know that the 4 in the key of C is F. To get to the 5, we need to do a whole step from F on the musical alphabet, and a whole step from F is G. Now we need to do another whole step from the 5, so a whole step from G would be A, but we know that 6 is a minor, so it makes it A minor. Finally, we do a whole step from the 6, so a whole step from A is a B, and that would be a B diminished. Now, if you wanted to continue on, you would do another half step, and that would bring you right back to C. A half step from B is to C, and that works out perfectly for every key that we're in. You should always be able to arrive right back after the 7, a half step from the 7, back to the 1. And it just repeats itself. It's the beauty of the musical alphabet and music theory. So, going from left to right, starting at the 1 is C, the 2 is D minor, the 3 is E minor, 4 is F, 5 is G, 6 is A minor, and the 7 is B diminished. All right, so hopefully you're kind of getting the hang of it. We're going to go through the G scale together, and then again you have the other 3 to work through on your own. So the 1 in the key of G, the root of G, is the G chord. We take a whole step from G to give us A minor, and that's the 2. We take a whole step from the 2, which would be A. A whole step from A is B minor to make it the 3. To figure out the 4, we need to do a half step from the 3. So a half step from B is a C. So the 4 is C. A whole step from the 4 to get the 5. So a whole step from C is D. So the 5 is D. Another whole step from the 5 to get the 6, so a whole step from D is E, and the 6 is a minor, so it's E minor. And then finally, another whole step from the 6 to get the 7, so a whole step from E is F sharp diminished. Now, if we were going to do one more half step to get back to the 1, that would work out perfectly. We'd arrive right back at G with the 1. So now you can see how every key has these 7 chords. You can see instead of me saying play the G, D, E minor, C, I can tell you in the key of G, play the 1, 5, 6, 4. And if you know all of these through the cheat sheet, you can easily transpose. You can transpose to C and play the 1, 5, 6, 4, which is C, G, A minor, F. You can start, next week we're going to learn how to play by ear, how this applies to that. And also other little bits and pieces we're going to pull together, class number 4, the loose ends. So this is essential. This is a foundation to music theory and what we're going to do. So I want to encourage you in your free time, go ahead and quiz yourself. Make note cards, flashcards, whatever you need to help yourself memorize and learn this. And pretty soon, you want to be able to be given a number in a certain key and be able to tell me what the chord is. That should be your challenge. So go ahead, this video is done, but go ahead and fill those last 3 keys out and then download the cheat sheet and check your work. I encourage you to stay focused. It will get easier if you apply yourself, and I encourage you to continue watching videos 2, 3, and 4.